taking back our representative. Constituents that faced high utility bills and poor service since he came into Lansing. Taking Back Our Power Coalition is proud to stand behind this bipartisan legislation that will take back our power from the utility companies. And please give a big and warm welcome to Representative O'Gara.
Hey everyone, first off, good morning. Actually my first ever press conference, so this is a moment. But first I want to thank the Central United Methodist Church here in Lansing for allowing us to be in their space and hosting us. And I also want to thank all the people who are here supporting this legislation. I want to thank my co-sponsors in the House, my colleagues that are here with me today. I want to thank the Taking Back Our Power Coalition. I think change truly comes from the grassroots, and I'm honored to be able to uplift those efforts. And I want to thank my constituents, because those are the people who led me to do this. And they've been calling and reaching out and venting about their energy rates and service for the past year that I've been here. And that's why I'm standing here today. So people across Michigan are fed up. They're sick and tired of poor energy reliability, but rising costs. Michiganders pay the highest energy rates in the region, but deal with the worst service. And I'm sure that nearly every person in this room has been affected in one way or another by a power outage. And I'm sure that you're tired of it too. I've heard from countless community members about how losing power affects them. In the last year, more than 1.5 million people, homes across our state, have been without power in these mass outage events. The people of Michigan are tired of being left in the dark. For some, the breaking point has been the thousands of dollars in spoiled groceries that must be thrown away. And others, it is the life-saving medication that has been wasted. During all 4 seasons in our state, our communities feel this vulnerability. Every snow, ice, spring, or summer storm, Michiganders are forced to go into crisis mode, scrambling to find a place to store their insulin, to keep warm, to stay cool, or to power life-saving devices. It's putting our lives at risk. Right now, utility corporations are brazen enough to openly brag about this malpractice. During an earnings call last year, DTE executives explained how plans to delay hiring, reduce their contractor workforce, and defer maintenance work would result in what they called another successful year. Another successful year of profits. We all know what has happened in the state. But why does it continue to happen year after year after year? It's because it is much cheaper for these corporations to spend money buying influence in the political process than it is for them to improve the quality of their services. State-regulated utilities in Michigan are overseen by the Michigan Public Service Commission. The MPSC gets their directives from us in the legislature. Each year, these companies pour millions of dollars into campaigns and lobbying efforts, almost daring a legislator to enact regulations that would improve services but cut into their corporate profits. DTE only needed to spend a few $1 million to buy the political influence to net them billions in profits. For example, DTE gave a $1.26 million in political contributions to legislators over their careers in the previous legislature. That $1.26 million investment helped DTE net a reported $1.4 billion in earnings in 2023. Now, while that's a great year for their profits, we know all too well it's a disaster for the communities that rely on their services. And that's the money that we know about. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. Now, I taught history, not math, but it's pretty easy to see how investing millions of dollars in political influence to net billions of dollars in profits became DTE's preferred business model. That's a pretty astronomical return on investment rate. We have to break this repetitive cycle. It's time to put people over profits. Yesterday, I introduced House Bills 5520 and 5521, which would take the power back from utility corporations. If enacted, these bills would prohibit state-regulated utility companies from using their billions to fund political campaigns or lobby legislators through the use of 501c4s and 527 organizations. For those who may not know, 501c4 organizations are political nonprofits that use their donations to spend on lobbying and issue-based education. And 527 organizations are political action committees that can influence the selection and election of candidates. So House Bill 5521 would ban state-regulated utilities from donating to 501c4s and 523s, and House Bill 5520 would ban any 501c4 and 527 affiliated with the state-regulated utility from doing the same. It's simple. We need to break the stranglehold that utilities have over our legislature. And it's time for the people of Michigan to take the power back. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wagella. And next I'd like to introduce Regina Sturgis, who is with Michigan People's Campaign, and Michigan People's Campaign is also a founding member of the Taking Back Our Power coalition. So without further ado, Regina.
Well, thank you for having me and allowing me to speak about my experience being a Detroit resident and also being an organizer, outreaching in the community and talking to folks. Every time we have a power outage, every time that there's a rainstorm, we go out in the community and we talk to people and we hear the actual vulnerability. We see what they're going through, how they have people in their lives who are reliant upon medicines, how they're reliant upon the food that they have, the heat, the electricity that they need. The insecurity that we have been facing is too hard to speak of. The issue is this monopoly was not always a monopoly. I remember as a child when we had our electric and our gas, but then that changed. And with that change came not only just a regulated monopoly, but price hikes. Increased prices on residents, increases in accountability, such as moving meters from inside of their homes, outside of their homes, so DTE can have more access to be able to shut off our power from the people who need it the most. But there was no accountability for DTE when the infrastructure was failing, in that every time there's a rainstorm, every time there's a snow, me, my mom, and my family, we pray, we hunker down, and we contact the people in our base, and we contact the people in our family just to find out if they're okay, if they have power, and if they need somewhere to go. This is something that we've been dealing with for too long in Michigan. And this is just not my story. This is a story of multiple Detroiters and Michiganders alike. And I feel that DTE needs to be held accountable. They never compensate us for the energy that we lose. They don't compensate us for the spoiled food. They don't compensate us for hotel bills or eating out when we need to because there's no food in the house. That level of insecurity and taking and stripping of those basic rights and things that we need to survive every single day brings an amount of insecurity where we cannot rely on DTE. We can't rely on them, but they can rely on our dollars. Every year in January or February, we get a high $600, $500 bill out of nowhere. Anyone on a fixed income or budgets their money cannot expect that kind of bill, that kind of money being taken out of their pockets. So it's a level of insecurity that we cannot continue to deal with. DTE needs to be held accountable. That's why with this campaign, being a part of this campaign, to take back our power and to unite Michigan in a way in which we can fight back and show that our voices need to be heard. We need to continue our fight against DTE, and I'm happy that this comprehensive legislation, which needed to be inputted and implemented a long time ago, is being introduced today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Regina. And our next speaker is also a founding member of the Taking Back Our Power coalition from Clean Water Action, is Nicole Kiway Bieber. Nicole, did I say that?
That's fine.
I'm sorry.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Nicole Kiway-Fiber, Mid-Michigan organizer for Clean Water Action, which represents 130,000 Michigan residents across the state. I'm also a tribal citizen of the Little Traverse Bay Bands of Ottawa. I remember having my first child in my mid-20s and hearing about climate change and thinking we would never neglect our duties so much that my baby's future would be at risk. Surely we could collectively envision and work our way out of systems heating the planet into disaster. That baby is now 22 years old, and she has no faith whatsoever that our elected leaders would ever listen to her or care about her experience or those she loves. For decades, the monopoly utilities have wielded their political power to create this feeling of helplessness when it comes to addressing what we now call the climate crisis. The bills being introduced today are the first step for the people to take back our power from monopoly utilities. So what is lost when decision-making is foremost a conversation about money and profits? The wealth inequality exemplified by monopolistic corporations warps our representative democracy by equating dollars with validity, with worth. Even if you are not among those handsomely profiting thanks to rules set by the powerful to maintain their positions of outsized influence, you must still speak on their terms to even have the smallest chance of joining the conversation. What is lost when money is equated with validity is people's capacity to find creative solutions that are unbeholden to the same old giant corporations receiving the same old preferential treatment. DTE and Consumers Energy use their stranglehold on the energy industry to wield the power of their profits. They make sure that any attempts made to transition away from fossil fuels are going to prioritize the most convenient and softest landing possible for their own polluting business model. Climate solutions, from the start, default and devolve into an exercise of concessions to monopolistic industries. Before we know it, something like the empowering appeal of community solar is no longer prioritized. When it comes to dumping poisons into the air and water, supposedly business-friendly regulations are in actuality removing protections necessary to health and well-being. As calls for environmental justice make clear, it's primarily poor communities who bear the brunt of these failures, suffering the consequences of a status quo that continues to enthrone so-called corporate stakeholders firmly at the head of the table. The moneyed behemoths who set the terms of the discussion and essentially send out the invitations. Today, these bills take the first step at changing that equation for the people. What is lost? Who is left out? Let's have a mental exercise to turn the stakes of a climate conversation away from profits and money. I invite you all to consider animals and wildlife. There is a biodiversity crisis occurring now. We are in the midst of the 6th mass extinction now. If all we do is respond to money, then how does restoration become an active priority? To care about and deeply value the lives of rivers and frogs and plants is probably among one of the most transformational things we could do, because the living world they enable is ultimately priceless. Those lives are not worthless, despite being treated as either fodder for or impediments to convenient financial gain, when not left out of the decision-making calculus entirely. The abuse of our plant and animal relatives, the suffering when those lives are sacrificed and dismissed causes me and my family and so many in our Indigenous community and beyond real and significant pain. The corrosive influence of energy companies on our politics has greatly hampered the ability of our elected leaders to address the ongoing biodiversity crisis as well. Corporations founded on and invested in extraction and exploitation will not be the ones to speak for the trees, the water, the air, the animals, the insects, for you or for me or our families and communities. We are the ones to do that, and it's so very important for us to be heard. The legislative effort to take back our power So money is not the sole measure of worth, is a necessary place to begin. As an Anishinaabe mother and tribal citizen of the Waganakasino Dawa, I can only relearn and pass along our cultural and spiritual traditions to my 3 children if our more than human relatives exist and thrive in clean water on bountiful lands. They are necessary, they are beloved, and since monopolistic corporations continually fail to factor in the importance of life on Earth, it is time to usher them off their ill-gotten throne. Today we are proud to stand with Representative Wagela and the other lawmakers and coalition partners present to support this legislation and join the call for its immediate passage. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nicole Kiwe-Viber, for your contribution and your grace here. As you can see, the Taking Back Our Power Coalition is a diverse coalition of economic, racial, social, and environmental justice organizations. And we are here and determined to pass these reforms. We are pleased to be joined by other elected leaders here today. We have right here from the city of Lansing, Representative Emily Diebendorf to address you all next. So, Representative.
I'm going to keep this brief because I never keep anything brief. And I am never going to be able to say anything better than Nicole does, who is kind enough to grace us with her wisdom and presence quite often these days. I want to start out by thanking my colleague, Representative Wagela, for his leadership in the House on not just this one issue, but leadership on corporate accountability, period. Leadership on ensuring that we focus on the basic needs of our residents and our constituents, because that's what we're here for. To ensure that everybody has what they need. I'm also here as the exception in this row of folks, because Lansing, Michigan has a publicly owned utility. That doesn't make it perfect, but it does mean that over time, we have been able to exercise public and people-powered accountability for our local utility. And that has led to change. We all remember the great ice storm of several years ago. I know that in my neighborhood, my former neighborhood now, in the Morris Park neighborhood, we moved a generator from house to house, each house getting a generator for about 3 hours at a time, in order to ensure that our pipes wouldn't freeze and that we could stay alive. We then took our concerns and our complaints to our publicly owned utility. We evaluated who had authority with that entity. We evaluated whether we were able to submit the public input and make the change that was necessary for our community to stay safe and alive. And that accountability has increased. But we also learned that our voice was essential to the process. That is the exception in Michigan because of the currently existing monopolies. The vast majority of our Michigan residents do not have a clear route to accountability. Today, we are choosing safety, we're choosing survival, and we're choosing it over corporations. Today, we are choosing our collective moral compass over money. And that's not because it is a pie in the sky aspiration that we take better care of each other. It's because when we're talking about electricity, when we're talking about power, we're talking about elements that we simply cannot exist without. The vast majority of us do not have the tools or the wherewithal or the skills to live off the grid and without electricity, just as we can't live without water, just as we can't live without food, just as we can't live without a roof over our heads in a safe structure. This is the beginning of a longer conversation about ensuring that we take care of our neighbors, but also that we are able to ensure that nobody has to go without their medicine, that nobody has to lose their food, that our health equipment that is available to us at home doesn't suddenly turn off and leave us without life-saving resources. This should be a shift, and it should be a beginning. This is more power to the people, and we appreciate it. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Representative Diebendorf. And once again, thank you to Senators Irwin, and a special thank you to Representative Wagala for introducing the legislation. We look forward to working with all of you to help pass this legislation and to make a tremendous change in the lives of the people in the state of Michigan. I'd like to say that on behalf of Detroit Action, thank you all for joining us. And thank you to the other members of the Taking Back Our Power Coalition as well for standing up here and lending your voices today. We hope to see everybody at 6 p.m. tonight at the UAW Local 600 Hall in Dearborn for our Detroit kickoff. And thank you for coming.
Does anybody have any questions from the press?
I guess, how soon can we see these bills introduced?
I enrolled them yesterday, so they'll be read in. I think they don't get read in on non-attendance days, but I think so Tuesday, I think you'll be able to kind of see them. We're willing to send the bills to anybody who would like as well, so you can take a look at them. Yes?
Or did you have a follow-up?
Just, I guess, another quick question. There's been other kind of free speech concerns around whether or not corporations can donate to political campaigns, et cetera. How do you plan on addressing that issue with these bills if it does arise?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly expect that if these bills were ever to become law, DT would and consumers would do whatever they could to stop these bills because it would directly impact their profits in the long run. However, we've seen similar legislation, I believe, in 15 different states, and I'm sure some of the coalition partners could actually give more specifics on that. That has held up in court. So I think we'll see what happens, but I think there's good precedent for this similar legislation already passing the Citizens United test.
Have there been conversations yet with leadership about the likelihood of seeing these bills get a committee hearing or get across the finish line this term?
Yeah, I mean, my ask has been for these to go to ethics committee, so we'll see where they go. I would say, I think all of you have been around in Lansing long enough to know that this is going to be an uphill battle. These corporations donate to both sides of the aisle, but for us, we're going to keep advocating because the people of Michigan want these bills. I think that's pretty clear. You could do some polling of your own if you'd like, but I think it'd be pretty obvious. The answer would be like, yes, I don't want the utility companies influencing my lawmakers unjustly. So we're going to advocate as much as we can and see where they go from there.
Representative, have there been any conversations about pursuing this change through some type of petition effort to put something on the ballot? I know BNP is involved in this, but given the fact that the people in leadership for both parties, take such large amounts of money from the utilities, is that a more potential successful avenue for this? I'm just wondering if you all have talked about this at all.
Yeah, I haven't been involved in those conversations, and I think you make some interesting points. Our focus right now is on the legislature, but I think if you look at it, that might end up being like an end goal at some point. That's not in direct discussion at this moment. I certainly don't have the millions of dollars that you need to do that, but I wish I did. But I'm not a DeVos member.
I just had a question. If there have been any conversations, obviously early stages, but if there have been any conversations about enforceability, I know there have been problems with campaign finance laws in the past.
Yes. So we're open to working on the bill more as we move forward. But I believe what we have written in the bill right now is any violation of this, the utilities would have to pay 10 times the amount, a fine 10 times the amount of their violation, and that would go back to the general fund.
Would this impact, this would be if you send us the bill, but would this impact the utilities PACs where they're taking money from their, it's not coming directly from the utility, it's coming from their employees, they're pooling it in a PAC and then giving it to candidates?
I believe so. So we're affecting not only the utilities' ability themselves to give to 527s and 501c4s, but their affiliated PACs from doing the same thing. So I imagine it's an interesting question. I think it would affect that, yes. Give me some grace if you look and that's not the case, but I think that's understanding what we're doing correctly. Yes. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Just to clarify that,
Yeah.
there's a lot of focus on utilities, but I think it was the way there were some things phrased was any business seeking a state contract. Is that
So-
utilities as well?
So my bills directly deal with the utilities. The coalition at large is working at greater any monopoly corporation receiving state contracts. I think that's the end goal of the taking back our power. But the bills I introduce directly deal with the utilities. And I'll add, I think this is a complex issue that if you are not a political insider, you might not understand all of the moving parts. So for me, I truly believe that this is a great way to educate and inform community members of the problem, because this is something they can see and feel directly, right? Everybody needs their power to work. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to continue to advocate in our communities and explain, hey, this is how these corporations are influencing the political process.
Brandon, are there any questions? Oh, you got another question on this?
Yeah, I guess just following up on that. So you mentioned there are, eventually maybe looping in other public corporations as well. Are there any other bills that you have planned in the immediate or in the short term dealing with this?
We have some things that we're working on, but not at a point where we can announce anything. So
So to be clear, it's just the two House bills in this package.
correct.
But on that topic, I was just going to say, if anybody wants to ask some other questions about the coalition work,
Yes.
and how it goes beyond the utilities, Adam is here and happy to answer those questions.
I had a follow-up, just
For Adam,
has the group or coalition tried to intervene in MPSC cases? If I remember correctly, I think AG Nestle has been able to curb some political contributions through those cases.
Yeah, some of the coalition partners toward action included, Scott, you can probably speak to that, but have intervened in cases of the NPSC through Defend Black Voters, resulting in bringing light that isn't usually brought to those cases and actually disallowing some of the rate increases.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was last year, February or March, during the NPSC meetings. There were at least two in Detroit that we attended, and others statewide, I think, with Michigan People's Campaign, that we were able to, do a good job, getting in our communities, like pulling people out, like letting their voices be heard, looking to the NPSC, and we definitely saw, we feel like there was value in that, and there was real consideration there. There was probably some pressure though, but more so, the utility companies, what we saw after was them going back up to that pressure waned, and talking to people in the state government to find other ways that they could raise rates. So that's, I think, where this idea came from.
And I'll just add, and I don't know, I see one of Representative Morgan's staffers back here. Representative Morgan had a statement. He was supposed to be here today, but and he did have a statement. I don't know if we should share it. I don't know if he heard me. It's in the phone world. Do you have Jason's statement by any chance?
No.
Okay. Anyway, so we have one. Okay. So I haven't read this out loud before, so hopefully I got it here, right? All right. So Representative Morgan's statement is: Michigan residents pay some of the highest rates in the nation and receive some of the least reliable power. Despite this, our investor-owned utilities continue to neglect our grid and raise rates. These are state-regulated monopolies, but the state may not be able to ensure proper oversight if utilities are spending on politics. It's time to give the people the power to regulate energy, not big utilities. It's a short statement, but I wanted to make sure to share that.
Just one question. Do you have one more question for me? Do you have any concerns that just appearing at this press conference today that DT or consumers will, they've done this in the past to people who speak out against them, fund opponents to them in primary elections to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars?
Yeah, certainly a conversation, but I think if you've been following anything that my office has done in Lansing, we haven't made decisions based on what is the establishment going to do to get us out of office. We make them based on conscience and what we believe to be right. And certainly that crossed my mind, but I guess what I'll say is I believe that the people in my community have trusted me to fight for them, and I promised them. I knocked on 10,000 doors in my last primary, and I'll knock on another 15,000 if I have to. And I do believe that beats money at the end of the day. I've gone this entire time without taking money from corporations in general, and that might make me one of the few people in this institution that does that, but I believe that that's what the people in my community deserve, and I try to live that value. So certainly a possibility, but certainly ready to do the work that it takes to beat that, if that is the case.
Also, excuse me. This is why the coalition exists as well, to ensure that we are in our communities having these conversations actively in election times and not, right? Working on, doing popular education and issue education in our communities, and then in election time, standing with the folks who stand with our communities, right? So, our coalition will have, I think, everybody's back that's here today.
And I will say that Representative Lavella and I are used to hearing rumors of threats of opponents or us not being supported with enough donations in our own campaigns. We certainly trust our constituencies to let us know what they need, and everything that we do is in response to what our constituents say that they need. We trust that our constituents will come out and support us if we're doing the right thing, if we're coming down on the right side of history. And I also have faith in our constituencies to not support us if we shift to working in ways that are detrimental to them, because we should be held accountable as well.
Any more questions? All right, thanks, folks. There's an event in Dearborn tonight at 6 o'clock. Obviously, we're talking about the broader coalition launch. There will be a press release out later today following that event with some more information. Thanks, everybody.